Good day, everyone. Welcome back to Mathematics MJ, where numbers make sense. So today, guys, we're focusing on completing the square, how to complete the square, grade 11. So there are two cases in which you will be expected to complete the square. The first case, you have to complete the square in an expression. You complete the square in a quadratic expression. An expression is something like this, where there's no equal sign. And then number two, you're expected to complete the square in a quadratic equation. Quadratic equation, it's the same expression, but then now we introduce equal sign to prove that this is an equation. So the difference between these two is an equal sign, right? Um, Now, completing the square on a quadratic expression is a technique used in order to express the quadratic expression in a form of a x plus or minus p all squared plus q. So you move from this form to that form there, right? And this becomes the formula of a what? Of a parabola. When we get to functions, I will explain everything. What do I mean by a parabola and all of that? But for now, let's just focus on completing the square. So there are steps that you have to follow when completing the square. You have step number one there. So you have your steps there. When completing the square, step number one, you take out the coefficient of x squared. If it is not equals to 1. Number two, you can write these steps down so that you can remember. You add and immediately subtract half the coefficient of x squared and then you square. Number three, you factorize. And distribute the coefficient of x squared. So factorize the perfect square trinomial and distribute the coefficient of x squared. Again, these steps are not difficult. I will just show you how to apply these steps when it comes to the examples. Now let's move to example one. So for example one, they're saying complete the square on, and then they're giving us the expression there, which is x squared minus 6x plus 7. So the first thing that you have to do here, you have your x squared minus 6x, and then you write your 7 there outside. You'll have to write your 7 outside, right? But I'll show you. So you'll have your, okay, let me do this. You take this value here, which is minus 6, you multiply it by half according to the steps. So that's half times negative 6, and then you square all squared. This will give us minus 3 squared. And then you come back here, you open the bracket, take this 7 outside the bracket, right? So this 7 will just say plus 7 here, and then um, the square root of x squared, that's just x, and then, okay, before we start with the square root there, we have our x squared there. Let's take this back to the bracket now, right? But before we do that, let's drop down minus 6x, and then now we're taking that negative 3. So you'll have your plus negative 3 squared. And then from here, you have your squared there. And then you take the square root of x squared. Take the square root of x squared, you'll have your x there. And then the square root of minus 3 squared, right? That's 3 there. And then you take this sign, drop it. There's minus there. And then all squared, right? But before we continue there, here we've added minus 3 squared. So which means here we have to subtract minus 3 squared. I hope we are together there. And then you'll end up with minus 9 plus 7. And then this will give us x minus 3 squared minus 2. And then this is your final answer. Let's complete the square for example 2. This one will be a bit easier now. You have your x squared plus 4x minus 8 for those who did not understand, right? So this value here, that's 4 times 1 over 2, and then all squared. And then this will give us 2 squared, right? And then as from here, open bracket, and then you have your x squared plus 4x, and then plus 2 squared. We're taking this value here, right? And then this value here, which is minus 8, should be outside the bracket. Now you have your minus 8 there. And then after adding, we must also subtract, right? So that these two things can cancel each other. And by doing that, we didn't add or subtracted anything from this expression. It's still the same, right? So you'll have your minus 2 squared today, right? And then this becomes your x plus your 2 all squared minus 4 minus 8. So how do I get to this level? Square root of x squared, that's x. Square root of 2 squared, that's 2. Drop down the plus sign, that's a plus sign there. And then we're done, just like that. And then from here, you just simplify further. You'll have your x plus 2 squared minus 12. And then from here, it's just the repetition of everything. Let's go to example 3. So for example 3, we are given x squared minus 5x minus 8. So what is the first step? Add and subtract, right? And also multiply the middle term by half. So that's 1 over 2 times, okay, let me do this. minus 5, and then all squared, which is our middle term. There's a squared there. This will give us minus 5 over 2 all squared. Then you come back here, open bracket, take this one out, minus 8 there. You have your x squared, you have your minus 5x, and then plus your minus 5 over 2 all squared. And then from here, after adding, we must also subtract here the same thing. So you'll have your minus 5 over 2 squared. And then from here, the square root of x squared, that's x. You drop down the sign, that's minus. Square root of negative 5 over 2, that's just 5 over 2, and then all squared, right? And then from here, we have to take care of this. And this will give us 25 over 4. And then minus 8. So one would say, why are we having 25 over 4, but this is negative and negative? Now, the reason is the fact that if this is an even number, it will automatically affect and cancel rather the negative sign there, and you'll end up with positive, right? So you'll have your positive 25 over 4. Then that 25 over 4 must be multiplied by this negative. Hence, now we end up with our 25, a negative 25 over 4. Hope it makes sense. And then from here, you'll have your x minus 5 over 2 all squared minus. You just use your calculator there, you get your 57 over 4. And then that's it. Example 4. We're still completing the square. Now we are given 2x squared plus 6x minus 6. So this is a quadratic expression. So you cannot divide. You cannot divide by the coefficient of x squared. But they said we have to take out the common factor. So let's take out the common factor of 2. Now you're left with x squared there plus 3x minus 3. Close your bracket. Right? Now you have your standard trinomial expression. Now let's start now with the first step. Half times what? The middle term, which is 3 all squared. This will give us 3 over 2 all squared. And then from here, add and subtract, right? Equals to, you have your 2. Okay, let's do this. You have your x squared there, plus 3x, and then we add this. So you'll have your 3 over 2 all squared, right? And then close the bracket. This one should be taken out, minus 3, not minus 6, but minus 3. So we take out our minus 3, and then this one should come here. Now we are subtracting. We are no longer adding. We are subtracting. So you'll have your minus 3 over 2 all squared. Right? And then we close there, the bracket. And then from here, you'll have your, okay, equals to, you'll have your 2, open bracket. Now we're looking for the square root of x squared, that's x. Drop down the sign, which is positive, that's plus, and then you take this one here, which is just 3 over 2, close bracket, all squared. That's the first step. And then you simplify this using your calculator, and you will get your minus 9 over 4 minus 3. And then from here, we have to take care of these two numbers. So we have your 2 x plus 3 over 2 all squared. This will give us minus 21 over 4. And then the last step here, you just distribute 2. So you distribute 2. If you listen to me, you'll understand this thing, you'll master it. So you'll have your 2 and then open bracket x plus 3 over 2 squared there minus, this will give us 21 over 2. Now, obviously, you are multiplying 21 over 4 by 2, right? 2 and 2 here will cancel, you'll be left with 2. Hence, this is 21 over 2. But don't forget the negative sign there. And then we're done, just like that. We move to the next example, which is example 5. So for example 5, we apply the same thing. We have to complete the square and we are given 3x squared minus 5x minus 9. Again, we have to take out the common, we have to take out the common factor there, which is the coefficient of x squared. So you have your 3, now you'll have to do x squared minus, here you will have to do 5 over 3x and minus 3. Now the reason why we're having 5 over 3, because when you multiply this back, we must get 3. Multiply this one back. 3 and 3 will cancel, you'll be left with only 5, which is that 5. And then you multiply back, you get your negative 9. I hope it makes sense. I hope it make perfect sense there. And then from here, now we have to apply this law of 1 over 2 times negative 5 over 3 all squared. And then that will eventually give us negative 5 over 6 all squared. And then from here, come back, we have your 3. We have x squared minus 5 over 3x. And then we have to write this, which is our minus. Sorry, that's our plus. And then minus 5 over 3 all squared. You close the bracket. Then this one should be taken out, right? So you'll have your minus 3 there. And then the same thing. Now we're subtracting it here. So let's do that. So you have your 3 there, subtract there. You'll have your minus 5 over 6 all squared, which is negative there. And then equals to, and then we have your 3. Now we must simplify, right? So the square root of x squared, that's x, drop down the negative sign there, square root of negative 5 over 3 squared, then that's just 5 over 3 all, and then there's squared there. And then you simplify this value here alone, and you will get your negative 25 over 36 minus 3. Close your bracket there. And then we have to take care of these numbers here. So you'll have your 3 x minus 5 over 3 all squared. And when we use our calculator, we got negative 133 over 36. And then from here, what do? You distribute. It distributes the 3. Let's distribute the 3 there. And you'll end up getting your 3 x minus 5 over 3 all squared, and then minus 133 over 12. And then this is your final answer. And then we're done completing the square on quadratic expression. Now we have to move to the quadratic equations now. We must also complete the square. So the first step, you move the constant. Okay, number 1, move the constant. To the right hand side, which is our RHS. Number 2, we divide both sides by the coefficient. By the coefficient of x squared. If it is not equals to 1. Number 3, obviously now we have to multiply by half the middle term here. By half you multiply the middle term and then you all square, right? And then number 4, you solve for x. You solve for x. I know now you understand what do I mean by step number 3. So please make sure that you write these steps down before I start with my examples, right? When you're done writing, that's when now you can continue now. Listening to me. You can continue now to listen to me as I'll be explaining how to complete the square when it comes to equations. So let's move to equation 1. Let's move to our example 1 rather, sorry. So your example 1, here they're saying we have to solve for x. So you solve for x if x squared plus 12x minus 9 equals to 0. And then write answers in simplest set form. In simplest set form. So that's not a problem. The first thing that we have to do there, you have your x squared plus 12x minus 9 equals to 0. Move the constant to the right hand side. So you'll have your x squared plus 12x equals to 9. We are transposing this, moving to the right hand side. And then step number 3, you introduce half. You multiply the middle term by half and then you square. So you'll have your 1 over 2 times 12 and then all squared. This will give us 6 squared. Right? And then introduce your brackets there. You have your bracket 1, bracket 2, then this is x squared plus 12x. Then we introduce this one here. So that's plus 6 squared. And then it's equals to plus 9. What you do on the left hand side, you must do on the right hand side. So here we are no longer subtracting because eventually when you transpose plus that 6 squared will cancel with 6 squared, right? So it's the same as saying we are plusing or we are also subtracting at the same time. So now we're at a step where we're looking for square root. Square root of x squared, that's x. Drop down the positive sign there. The square root of 6 squared, that's 6. And then introduce a squared there. That's all squared equals to, add those two numbers, we get you 45. And then from here, square root there, both sides. And this will give us x plus 6 equals to plus or minus root of 45. And then from there, x would be minus 6 plus root 45, or x is equals to minus 6 minus root 45. And then this will give us minus 6 plus 3 root 5. We did the laws of sets. At this stage, you have to understand this, but if you don't understand, go back to our previous video and you will understand. Right? You will understand. And then let's move to example 2. Let's move to example 2. So for example 2, we are still solving for x to 1 decimal place, and then we are given an equation there. Our equation for example 2, you have your 3x squared minus your 15x minus 21 equals to 0. You must solve for x correct to correct to 1 decimal place. So firstly, you move the what? The constant. Sorry, this is 21, not 12. Transpose this to the right hand side, you'll have your 21 there. And then from here, we have to divide both sides by 3. You can divide both sides by 3, since this is an equation. Divide everything by 3. So this is x squared minus 5x equals to 7. And then from here, we introduce half, multiply, and then you square the middle term. So you'll have your half there multiplied by minus 5 all squared, and then this will give us our minus 5 over 2 all squared. So now from here, you introduce your brackets equals to the 7. You add this side first, which means you'll have your plus minus 5 over 2 all squared. That's your x squared minus 5x, and then you add here, that's plus minus 5 over 2 all squared, right? And then from here, you look for the square root of x squared, that x minus, you drop down the sign there, and then you have your 5 over 2 all squared equals to, let's take care of this here using a calculator, and we'll end up with our 53 over 4. And then from here, it's the matter of using square root. Now you'll have your x minus 5 over 2, which is equals to plus or minus a root of 53 over 2. And this will give us x is equals to our 5 plus or minus root of 53 over 2. Then this is your final answer. But they said correct to 1 decimal place, sorry. Correct to 1 decimal place. So your x would be 6,1, or x is equals to negative 1,1. then that's it. Example 3. We have to solve for x, and then we are given 4x squared plus 12x minus 8 equals to 0. Again, we have to divide by 4 after we've transposed the constant. So constant there is 8. We divide everything by 4, and you'll end up with x squared plus 3x equals to 2. And then we introduce our half. 1 over 2 times 3 squared equals to 3 over 2 all squared. And then from here, you introduce the brackets equals to 2. This is x squared plus 3x. Take this one. You have your 3 over 2 all squared. Do the same thing for both sides, all squared. And then the square root of x squared, that's x, square root of this one here. You'll have your plus 3 over 2 all squared. And then you have to take care of those two numbers there. And you'll end up with your 17 over 4. And then from here, we go back to taking out the square root there. Take the square root rather. This is equals to plus or minus your root 17 over 2, right? The reason we're using a square root because of there's a square there. And then from here, we transpose. Now x is equals to negative 3 plus or minus root 17 over 2. And then this will give us x is equals to minus 3 plus root 17 over 2, or x is equals to minus 3 minus root 17 over 2. Then these are your solutions. And then we move to example 4. Example 4. We are given minus 2x squared there plus 8x plus 12 equals to 0. We have to solve for x again using the completing the square. Using completing the square, so obviously we need to transpose again. So this is minus 12, and then divide everything there by the coefficient of x squared. That's minus 4x equals to positive 6. Then introduce half. 1 over 2 times negative 4 all squared, and this will give us negative 2 all squared. And then from here you introduce your brackets there, equals to 6 plus minus 2 all squared, x squared minus 4x plus negative 2 squared. And then from here, this will give us x minus 2 all squared is equals to 10. Square root both sides, that's x minus 2 equals to plus or minus root 10. And then you transpose, and you will get your 2 plus root 10, or x is equals to 2 minus root 10. Final answer. And then we're done with completing the square. Now I want us to move to the application now. How to apply completing the square. Now it's application of completing the square. So application, let's take example one. Let's go to example one quickly. You'll understand through example one. So for example one, the question says determine the minimum value of x squared minus 8x plus 11, right? So when we go back to grade 10 graphs, you have your parabola, a smiling face, and parabola, a sad face. So this point here becomes our lowest point, the last point here, which is our minimum. This one is the highest, it's the peak, it becomes our maximum, right? So basically, y at turning point becomes our minimum value or maximum value. Remember, I spoke about this equation, plus or minus p all squared plus q, right? So now this value here is x at turning point, and then this value here is our y at turning point. So your q here, the last value, becomes your minimum or your maximum, because it's what our y at turning point. It's basically this point here, which is our y at turning point, right? So now I want us to use this information to answer the above question, right? Determine the minimum value of this graph. So this graph has a minimum value because if this is positive, the coefficient of x squared, if it's positive, then we expect a smiling face. Then that graph will have what? A minimum value. So the first step then, okay, we have to complete the square. So what do we do? Negative 8 times half, all squared, and you get your negative 4 squared, right? And then from here, introduce the brackets, squared, you have your x squared, the minus 8x plus, we are adding this. So that's minus 4 all squared. It's the standard procedure. When you've added, now you have to subtract the same thing. Minus 4 squared. And then this one should be outside the bracket, right? But we don't change the sign. That's plus 11. And then as from here, you look for the square root of x squared, that's x, drop down this sign, which is negative. And then this will give us our 4 there. The square root is 4. And then there's a squared. Now, minus. This will give us a negative 16 plus 11. And the final answer will be our negative 5. If you're not sure, you can just use your calculator, right? So your y is equals to that. Now we have to say, therefore, what is our y value at turning point? Here's our y value at turning point, which means we have to conclude and say minimum value is equals to negative 5. And you've answered your question. So this is important, guys, and these kind of questions are so tricky because they just come to you and say, find the minimum value, and then they give you a quadratic expression. So you have to be able to understand the question and also analyze it. So now let's move to the next example, example 2. So here they're saying determine the maximum value. So here they're looking for the maximum value. The maximum value if the expression were given 3x squared minus 3x squared minus 9x plus 18. right? So now we know the moral of the story here. It's to make sure that we first complete the square and then we get the value of y turning point, and then that value of y turning point becomes our maximum value. That's what we have to do right now. So let's do that. So the first step here, you take out the common factor as I've explained earlier on. So now you'll be left with x squared plus 3x minus 6, right? And then introduce half. So that's 1 over 2 times 3 all squared. And this will give us 3 over 2 all squared. And then from here, that's negative 3. Now you have your x squared plus 3x. Now we introduce plus 3 over 2 all squared. Close the bracket there. And then we have to subtract on the other hand. That's 3 over 2 all squared. Uh, don't forget to take out that negative 6, right? We have to take out that negative 6. So you'll have your minus 6 there. And then close your bracket. And then from here, you have your minus 3. Square root, that's x of x squared, right? And then square root of this value here, we'll get our plus 3 over 2 all squared. And then minus, we add these two together and you'll have your minus 33 over 4. And then from here, it's just an easy thing, distribute, and then you'll get your minus 3. That's x plus 3 over 2 squared, and then plus 99 over 4. Now, what is our maximum value? Our maximum value there is equals to 99 over 4. Then you've answered the question, right? And then the last example, here they're saying for example 3, a farmer wishes to make a rectangular garden against an existing wall. If the if he has 12 meters of fencing with which to make a garden. And then there's a drawing there. This is our wall. And then this is our fence. So made up of X and Y. They're saying for A, determine an expression for an area of the garden in terms of X, right? So we're looking for an expression of area in terms of X. Determine an expression for the area of the garden in terms of X, right? So, and then for B, they're saying what is the maximum area of the that the garden can have? What is the maximum area that the garden can have? So number 2, we're looking for the maximum area, right? So going back, this whole thing becomes our perimeter, right? But when using the properties of a rectangle, we know very well that the opposite sides are equal, right? So you have your X and Y, right? So basically the perimeter, so this is our perimeter, this one here. If here's 12 meter of fencing, which to make the garden 12 meter of fencing, this whole thing becomes our perimeter there, right? So how do you get the perimeter? You add all the sides. So for A, our perimeter, that's X plus Y equals to 12. So perimeter from grade 8, right? So X plus X will give us 2X plus Y, which is equals to 12, right? And then we have our equation 1, but they are looking for the expression of the area. And what is the area of a rectangle? So the area of a rectangle is given as our length times breadth, right? And you'll have your X times Y for area. But in place of Y, okay, before we continue there, from our equation 1, let's try and make Y subject of the formula there. So you have your Y equals to transpose 2X to the other side. You'll have your 12 minus 2X, right? So now in place of Y, we have to substitute 12 minus 2X. So you have your X there, and then your 12 minus 2X. Remember, we're still looking for the expression of an area in terms of X. And then from here, you just distribute. So this will be our 12X minus our 2X squared. That's your area, which is expressed as X, right? And then we're done. We'll move to B. So for B, they are looking for the maximum area now. They're looking for the maximum area. That's not a problem. Remember our area, we said that's 12X minus 2X squared. So we're looking for the maximum area there. How do we get the maximum area? We have to complete the square, right? Now let's write this in a standard form. We start with X squared plus 12X. And then take out the common factor there, minus 2X, you're left with X squared minus 6X. And then now introduce half. Now we have to introduce half. So you have your 1 over 2 times negative 6 squared. And this will give us our negative 3 all squared. And then from here, we come back, minus 2. You'll have your x squared there, minus 6x, and then plus negative 3 all squared, close bracket. Then obviously here we have a 0, so there's nothing that we can do but rather to subtract that minus 3 squared. And then from here, you'll have your minus 2, now the square root, that's x, and minus 3 all squared there, and then minus 9. And then let us now try and distribute. So this will be our minus 2 x minus 3 all squared plus 18, right? And then the value of a is equals to negative 2. The value of q is equals to 18. And then therefore the maximum area the garden can have is 18 meter squared, because this is a what? An area. So we'll have 18 meter squared. Guys, thank you so much for watching my videos. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye.